acknowledge my email, so I said maybe.
Busy days,
Okay.
but yeah, no, sorry about that.
All right.
Uh,
Well, it's good to have you here, Jaime. And these are our students. A pleasant good afternoon to everybody. We have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I
oh,
guess it's 15.
David,
Uh-huh.
will I be able to share my screen?
Right. Yeah, you are able to share your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, let me introduce to everybody a longtime acquaintance, Belizean, one of our jewels out there, Dr. Jaime Awe. You've been able to read some of his works, and you were tasked to reading the article on the excavations at Xunantunich, the tomb A9 tomb. And I guess that will be the focus of the presentation today. Dr. Awe is in the US. He's a professor at, is it Nerd? What is the name of the university? Arizona?
Northern Arizona
Northern,
University.
Northern Arizona University. And also, you're still working with the Belize,
Yes,
Belize River
yes,
Valley Reconnaissance Project.
yes, I
Yeah.
saw.
So he's the
And
director of the Belize River Valley project. Jaime, I'm telling my students, and I don't tire of repeating this to them, that we all live in the Valley of Kings and Queens, right? Right
we do.
here along the Belize River Valley. And that
We do.
is enough reason to be very much proud of our heritage, of our Mayan heritage here in Belize, no? Whether we're mestizo or not, I mean, we're part
Yeah.
of this heritage. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to Dr. Awe to begin his presentation. We have a 1 hour and 40 minutes, and the latter part will be for questions and answers. You've also received some guidelines as to what you will be journaling on based on your reading and presentation. So Jaime, the floor is all yours, and welcome again to John Paul II Junior College Belizean Studies class.
So uh, again, Mr. Wiz, thank you for the invitation. Saludos a todos. Como creo que todos los que están presentes somos del distrito del Cayo, así que muchas gracias por la invitación. Anyway, as Mr. Wiz noted, what I want to do today is to talk a bit about um, my work in the Belize River Valley, and just want to make sure that you guys are seeing this. Let me just my. Can you guys see my screen,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
or just me?
No, we see
Yes,
our screen.
yes, both.
Okay, awesome. There, so you can see that slide, right?
Yes,
That says tombs, ball courts, eccentrics, and graffiti. The significance of recent discoveries at Xunantunich. So everyone can see that, right? So as Mr. Ruiz said, I've been doing archaeology in our country, gosh, for more years than I can remember. And most of my work has focused in Cayo district, even though I've done work in the north and in the south as well. But I tried to continue most of my own research donde dejé mi touch, as we say. And so much of my work has focused on, places like Xunantunich, Cajalpech, Baking Pot by Central Farm. I even did the work and at the Benque site that I hope to return to in the not too distant future, because there's still a fair bit of work to be done there. But I wanted to share with you today some of the amazing discoveries we've made over the last 5 years at Xunantunich. Now, I don't need to tell you guys where Xunantunich is located. You can see it very clearly there, and you guys see it from your houses, right? It just sticks up top of that mountain. But I want you, to look at this slide, because I'm going to be mentioning the site of Naranjo, which is right there, Caracol. And if you look at the little map of the Maya world, I will also mention Calakmul, that is there, and another little site called Zibanche, which is, it's not on this map, but it's about there. So, but, as an introduction, let me tell you how, I began to work at the site of Xunantunich. I actually, the first time I really did any kind of work and research and conservation was between 2000 and 2004. The Belize government had decided that they wanted to develop some of our sites for the purposes of tourism development. And at that time, I was a professor at the University of New Hampshire. And I remember when Minister Espat at the time called me and said, Jaime, we want to do this big project across the country of Belize, and we want a Belizean to be the director of the project. And I said, well, I'd be more than happy to help. And I said, how long will the project be? And he said, 4 years. And I thought, ay. Well, short story, I had to resigned my job in the US because I thought, this was something I wanted to do, not just for me, but for Belize. And so I went, I moved back home, and we worked in the north and the south and the center and obviously in the west. And the work that we did at Xunantunich was really incredible. Then, that was 4 years long. And then between 2005 and 2015, I continued to work at Cajalpech and Baking Pot. And, I was about to leave the Belize Institute of Archaeology, and my colleagues there said, it would be really good if you could continue the kind of work that you do, like excavating and conserving our archaeological sites. And I promised them that, I was leaving the job there as director of the Institute, but I was not leaving Belize. I would never, I can never leave Belize. It's part of who I am. And so they said, well, could you do what you've done, do some more work at Xunantunich? So I designed this 5-year project, which actually started in 2014. So it's past the 5 years. And we wanted to continue what we had done. So let me just show you. In 2001, for example, this was how the Castillo used to look like. Now, I'm sure you guys have been there since, right? In the last few years, and it has changed dramatically because we excavated the whole front and we conserved it, right? There you can see, and in fact, 2 summers ago, I finished excavating this section and COVID hit us. Otherwise, I would have continued on that side of that building. And then the plan is then to go at the back of it and then do some work there. So hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future. In 2000, this building here and all 3 buildings look like this. And here's what we did after we excavated and conserved it. We even found a tomb deep inside of this building. Well, in 2015, I said, all right, what I want to do is I want to, you see these highlighted buildings. I'm going to finish working on these buildings, do some stuff there, in here, up on top, right there. And we've actually done more because we've also excavated here and we've done a lot of work in here in the palaces. So let me just give you some example. We'll start off on a little building up on top here that we call Structure 20. Okay, what is this? Okay, maybe it was, okay. So that was what Structure 20 used to look like before we started to excavate. And here you can see some of the students that work with me. And after we had started to excavate, these are actually my two children and my wife. But, you know, they were there just visiting one day. So we started to clear this one building. And after we had finished just the excavation, this is what it looked like. And then we conserved it. And today when you go, you can actually see that little building. And it's a very unique building because it has these round pillars. You don't find that anywhere else in Belize. Xunantunich is one of the few sites that has those kinds of, that kind of architecture. I mentioned that we had dug this building and conserved it back in the, between 2000 and 2004. And so between 2015 and 2019, we then tackled these two buildings. And here you can see this building here, when we had finished conserving it, right? We completely transformed it. This other building, we started to work, and again, you know, we've excavated all the way to the top, but then COVID, and so it's one of the structures I want to go back to and finish doing the conservation work. Well, these are those buildings there that I just showed you, and that one there. Well, in 2016, I decided that I wanted to work on this building here that we call Structure A9. And I wanted to go there because I knew that some people had done some work there, but they hadn't mentioned much. And so between, like I said, 2016, 2017, these areas with circles are the places that we focused our work on, right? And on top of the Castillo there. So on the palaces, this is, we started that work, and you can see again, this is what it looked like when we first began. That's that building here. We're going to come back to that because I want to look at this one here that we call Structure A9 right there. Right? So that's what that little temple used to look like in 2016, not too long ago. Well, one of the things that we always do, right? We start to excavate at the bottom of the building, and then sometimes we will go all the way to the top. Now, as I mentioned, we know that as early as the 1800s, this English medical doctor had excavated up there, and you can still see the kind of big hole that he had left behind. And then in the 1990s, on this side of the building, you can't really see it. This archaeologist, Richard Leventhal from University of California, he had excavated on that side. But for some reason, nobody had excavated the front of the building. And I thought, ¿por qué? Why? That's where I would dig. So I decided to do just that. Now, if you look here, there was a broken stela, right? And we started to clear it, and then we also cleared the stairway. And usually when we find stela, we turn it over to see if it's carved, because many times they're carved with hieroglyphic inscriptions that tell us something about the ruler and, when they came to power, if they got married, if they had military conflicts with other, parts of the Maya world. Well, sadly, that stela there was plain. It wasn't carved. Another thing that's always, common is that the ancient Maya would put offerings underneath the stela. They would put the offerings first and then put the stela up on top. So we always excavate down below to look for offerings. And I thought, well, I'm sure somebody, right? A lot of people have worked at Xunantunich. I was certain that somebody had excavated there and found whatever offering there was. But I never leave anything to chance. because I don't want to be, I don't want to regret later on that I didn't do it. So I said to the workers and to my students, let's excavate there. And one of my graduate students was taking notes that day. So there's the bottom of the building, right? That's the stairs. So if I go back, see, that's there. And there's the stela. And here's where we put our excavation, right at the bottom. So to get underneath the stela. And guess what? Nobody had excavated there. We found an offering that had 28 eccentric flints. See all these pieces of flint? This one's carved like what you call it, scorpion. These are like other points, etc. So nobody had excavated there. And we found all 28 of them. And it was like awesome. So when we excavated there, here's a picture of them after we had cleaned them up, right? There's the one that looks like a scorpion, and these looks like a serrated edge, and the other little pieces. Well, when we found that, remember, we found that right at the bottom of the stela. I said, another place that I usually find artifacts and offerings is right underneath the first steps going up to the top of the building. So I told, right, the guys, let's put an excavation there. Bingo, we found another offering. Look at all these this is as we were cleaning it. These are all obsidian. And here's what we found. 9 obsidian eccentrics, pieces of marine shell that had to be brought from the Keys, even piece of reef, and some other shells and some other pieces of what we call pyrite, right? And I mean, again, look, this one's a little bit like a scorpion, right? We call these eccentric flints, but essentially they're just offerings that the Maya would place to commemorate, their building. Just like today, important buildings, we usually put cornerstones that say, this building was opened by, Prime Minister, whoever the Prime Minister is on the year, etc. It's the same kind of things that the Maya used to do. Here's a close-up of those obsidian eccentrics that we found there. Well, we found the first offering right there by the stela, and then the second one right there. So I said to the guys, let's follow the steps. That's where the steps go in. And as we turned the corner, we found this carved panel with hieroglyphic inscriptions on it. And there's Jorge Can from Socots. Jorge and I have been working together since 1996. So again, right, this is where we found that panel, right? That's where we found the first offering, the second offering, and then we came this way and found that panel, right there. Well, usually we try to get photographs of it at night because you can see at night, you can put lights at an angle and it really brings out the hieroglyphic inscriptions, and they were beautifully preserved on this monument that we call panel 3. So there you can see, right, the inscriptions carved on it. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So we found that one over there. And I told Jorge, I said, you know what? There's got to be another one on the other side. Right? The Maya wouldn't only have put one panel on one side. So there is, God, what's his name? His last name is Iglesias. We said, okay, let's start to excavate over here. And sure enough, we found a second carved panel, right there. This, there was the first one. This one should have been right here, but we found it over there broken in 2 pieces. Probably because a tree in ancient times fell down. I mean, these things were abandoned there for more than 1,000 years. So that could have been why, or maybe somebody in antiquity, in ancient times, tried to move it. Whatever the case, right? We found the second panel. First one there, second one there. And here you can see the second one, right? Beautifully preserved. Again, there are numbers and a date and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's that second panel, there's the first panel. One day I'm standing up and I'm taking a photograph of the steps going to the top. And thankfully today we use digital photography. So when I got home and I put it on the computer, I zoomed in and I go, huh, that's strange. Steps look pretty good down there, but they are destroyed here. Something's wrong. Either the Maya or a big tree ripped it apart, or if there's a hollow underneath, it probably collapsed in. And I was hoping that it was the second reason. So I said to the guys, well, let's excavate in there and see what's going on. And this is where we excavated, and look what we found. Big chamber, a vaulted tomb. It was a huge tomb. I mean, the size of that room is bigger than probably most tombs I have excavated. And you can see, right, but the roof had collapsed and it had filled in with dirt. So it took us a long time to excavate all the dirt. But finally, we started to find the bones. There are the feet, the lower leg, the main part of the leg, the pelvis area, the body, and the skull was right over there. Here you can see some pictures again of these guys clearing, right, and excavating the burial that was in there. Here's a drawing again, right? So unfortunately, because the roof collapsed on the bones, a lot of the bones were just smashed, right, by the falling rocks on top of them. But in spite of that, right, we were able to collect everything that was in there. And the things that were in there were really amazing. There were all kinds of obsidian blades, most of them found right around the pelvis, likely, you know, they were used, actually they were right there. You can actually see them right there by the knee, right? The individual was wearing a necklace. You can see some of the jade beads and some of the other, right, jewelry out of shell that they would have worn. And then there were a whole bunch of pots, right, made out of pottery. And, you know, here you can see some of them, right, that we had to glue back, you know, from lots and lots of pieces. Here's another picture of some of them. Some of them had painted designs and decorations, but, you know, quite a large number, more than 20 some, in fact, more than about 30 vessels that were inside of this, inside of the tomb. Now, it's excited everyone so much that one of my colleagues and I, my colleague Christoph Helmke, he used to be my student, we published 2 articles just on the hieroglyphic inscriptions of the 2 panels. And you can see, right, the two publications right in this slide. And I can forward copies of these again to Mr. Riz, and also a copy of this. Another one of my colleagues published this article to talk about the importance of the discovery of these 2 panels. So let me share with you why everyone was making such a big deal about the discovery of these panels and the hieroglyphic information that they provided us. One of the main questions was, you know, well, first of all, like I said, how significant was this discovery? Well, it was significant because we knew that the panels were likely not produced at Xunantunich. And we could tell that just because of the way the carvings were done, like in these, we call these cartouches, right? Cartouches because there are 4 main glyphs in each of these ovals. Then the style of writing was more like the style of writing we have found at places like Caracol. And even the stone that was used to carve it is more like the kind of limestone you find up in the Maya Mountains, not in the Belize River Valley. Other things that pointed to some really intriguing information is that the two panels talked about not Xunantunich, but about Caracol, about Calakmul, and Zibanche, sites that are not in the Belize River Valley, right? So what were these panels doing here at Xunantunich? Well, here's where it gets even more interesting. We know that back in about 1905, that's a long time ago, not even Mr. Ruiz was born back then.
Dr. Awe, I just need to intervene, no?
Yes, anytime.
A question. How do you know who interprets the glyphs? Do you do that, or is there an expert who does that?
Yes. So in Maya archaeology, we have some people who specialize on the decipherment of hieroglyphic writing. I can identify a fair number of hieroglyphs, but I'm nowhere as good, as the guys that specialize on this. I mean, this is mostly what they do. Like the two guys, like Simon Martin, where is it? Right there. Simon Martin, who works at the University of Pennsylvania, and my friend Christoph Helmke, who teaches at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. So they specialize in that. So as soon as I found these, I remember, I got in touch with Christoph and I said, Christoph, I have some eye candy for you. And he immediately responded and he goes, did you find some new carved monuments? And I said, yes. And I sent him photos of it. And then he just started to work on it. So yes, we have people who specialize on this kind of stuff. But anyway, we know that, way back in 1905, this Austrian explorer had come through, stopped at Xunantunich, but then went to Naranjo, about 14 kilometers west of Xunantunich, not too far from Melchor. And he had found these panels at Naranjo. In 1909, 4 years later, a British archaeologist went to Naranjo, and he also photographed these panels at Naranjo. In the 1970s, another Englishman, Ian Graham, went to Naranjo and photographed it. But then in the 1980s, looters stole most of it. Today, only one fragment remains in Guatemala. Looters, sold it and they're scattered all over. So we knew that our panel looked very much, look at the cartouche there, right? 4 glyphs in this, right, quadrangular shape. And there again, and that's exactly what we have. Well, interestingly, some years before, archaeologists working at Ucanal is just up the Mopan River, but in Guatemala, about maybe 25, 30 kilometers south of Melchor. Well, they found this fragment. And then at Caracol, the chasers who were there also found 2 fragments of another one there. So here's what we know of this hieroglyphic stair. We know that it was commissioned because of the hieroglyphic information that the Maya carved in it. We know that a ruler from Caracol, whose name is Lord Khan II, that he commissioned the production of this hieroglyphic stairway. In other words, he told his scribe, I want you to carve, this information on these stones to celebrate my defeat of Naranjo in AD 631. So the scribes did that, and he used it to decorate one of the temples at Caracol, to brag that he beat the hell out of Naranjo. Simon Martin and Christoph Hanke, like I said, my friends, when we found our panels at Xunantunich, they said, this is perfect. We know that panel 4 from Xunantunich fits right there on the hieroglyphic stair. The first block, this is a close-up of that one there, starts the whole statement. And we know that because if you see this glyph, even I can read this glyph. This glyph, I like to call it the Pendejo Glyph. The reason I call it that is whenever you see a hieroglyph like that, it says, hey, Pendejo, what follows next is a date. And the date, you know, and there you can see a number that tells us it was the year da-da-da, when this event happened. And that's exactly what this does, right? And then our panel 3 would go at the end. And I couldn't put all the drawings together there. They were just too big. So here's our panel 4. And what does our panel 4 tell us? Well, let me just briefly try to tell you what our panel 4. Here you can see, right? It also has a date. There's a number. The number 1, 2, 3, and 5, 10, 15. So the number, it was 18 Canquin, right? Well, we know that the date 18 Canquin falls on a celebration, right, in the year December 7th, AD 642. It also tells us, right, that around that time, the capital of the Snake Kingdom moved from its original place at Zibanche to Calakmul. Now, some people would say, well, why would you move your capital? That happens a lot. The Brasileños, they moved their capital from Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia. We Belizeans have moved our capital 3 times. Anyone knows what was the first capital of Belize? St. George's Key. And then it went from St. George's Key to Belize City. And then because of Hurricane Hati, we moved it to Belmopan. So that kind of thing happened in the past as well, right? So we know then, right, that the Snake Kingdom was moved from Zibanche to this place called Calakmul in Campeche, Mexico. Panel 3 was even more informative. It provided 3 statements. It told us that a woman by the name of Lady Batsek died in 638 AD. It also told us that a ruler by the name of Washak Lahun Ubakan died in 640 AD. And it talks about a ball game. Now, if we had only found this monument and we didn't know about the hieroglyphics there that has additional information, we would have never been able to put the pieces together. And here's how this is important. It is important because we know who Lady Batsek was. She was the mother of Lord Khan II from Caracol. And that is why when he commissioned the production of the hieroglyphic stairway at his site, he wanted to mention that his mother had died. He mentions this guy from Calakmul, from Zibanche, because we know he was captured in a battle and then forced to play a ball game and then sacrificed. And this happens when they moved the capital from Zibanche to Calakmul. Now, when we were talking about this, some people go, well, I mean, how did the Maya move all these big rocks from Caracol? And when did they move it from Caracol to Naranjo? And why were two pieces doing at Xunantunich and another piece at Ucanal? How do you explain that? Well, we now know that, right? We know that in 680 AD, almost 50 years after Caracol had defeated Naranjo, Naranjo decides to get revenge. And it goes and it attacks Caracol. And it defeats Caracol. And it says, we are not going to leave this, hieroglyphic statement there that where you bragged that you beat us. So they rip off the stairs and they move a lot of it. And they give pieces to Xunantunich and to Ucanal, very likely because they were allies of Naranjo. Now, in terms of how did they move it, we think that they may have moved it to the Mopan River and then floated down. And then from the Mopan, because along the way, there is Ucanal. Ucanal's piece of the stairway could have been taken out. And then the two pieces for Xunantunich and the rest were taken over to Naranjo, which is only about, like I said, it's about 9 miles. Now, when you think about it, we know that many of the monuments from Egypt were removed from Egypt way back in time. At Stonehenge in England, even people who didn't have a high civilization like the Maya were able to move large pieces of rocks, for more than 50 miles. Even more interesting, at Calakmul, which is about 80 kilometers or 60 kilometers from Caracol, there's a big stela made out of slate. The only place that you can find slate, or the closest place you can find slate to Calakmul, is the Maya Mountains of Belize. So we know that Caracol may have gifted that piece of slate to the rulers of Calakmul. So we know how it got there. Right? So we can keep going here. So, the other question though for us, I can pause here. Any questions so far? Does that make sense?
Is there a book that I can read about the story of Caracol and Naranjo war? It's interesting.
Yes, what I'll do, you know what? I can't remember if this was one of the articles I sent to Mr. Ruiz, but let me find some other articles that I can forward to Mr. Ruiz, and then, I'm sure he can share that with you guys. All right. I mean, it's really interesting, because we're not making this up. It's the Maya who wrote this. It's like excavating and finding a book that was written, a history that was written by the people you're trying to learn about, right? This is what's amazing about these discoveries. And then we can use other methods of scientific analysis to then get even more information. And that's what I'm going to show you now, all right, with the tomb. Any other questions before I move?
I have another question. By the mere fact that these pieces are preserved, the Mayas must have recognized its value, no?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they buried some of these monuments. We have found buried carved stela at Caracol, at Pacbitun. Pacbitun is by San Antonio, and then even at Xunantunich. These are not the only monuments we have found at Xunantunich. So I'll send you guys a bunch of other articles that I have written, and that Christoph Helmke and I have also written together. But yeah, just it's really interesting. because it helps us to understand what happened in the past. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, now let's look at the tomb. So after we had figured out, right, that these monuments ended up at Xunantunich, about 50 years after they had been set up on this building at Caracol, and that they ended up here because Naranjo wanted revenge. Caracol had beat up Naranjo in 631 AD. So in 680 AD, Naranjo said, all right, we're going to go and attack Caracol. And they go and they attack Caracol. They rip off, they take things. This often happens, the Germans, for instance, during the Second World War, were taking, important pieces of art from all the countries around Europe that they had conquered. So again, in Egypt, like I said, Napoleon from France, right, when he took over Egypt, he also took stuff from Egypt. The British did the same thing. So a lot of this used to happen. Anyway, we know that these panels ended up there because Xunantunich was an ally of Naranjo in ancient times, and it helped Naranjo attack and defeat Caracol. And so Naranjo, which was the more powerful one, said, here's your share of the pieces of art that we took from Caracol. So I remember, when we found the tomb, I wondered, is it possible that the person in the tomb may have been the ruler that participated in the war against Caracol? And that is why they put the monuments on the pyramid where he or she was buried in. Well, I decided to look at that. That could only be so if the person inside was alive sometime around 680 AD when this war took place. If that person wasn't alive, they couldn't have participated. So here's what we knew from the hieroglyphic inscriptions on the monuments, and what we know from other monuments at Caracol and at Naranjo. We're going to go back in time. We know that Lady Batsek arrived in at Caracol around 584 AD, and that she came from somewhere around the Petén or around where Calakmul is. So obviously, she got married to the king of Caracol as part of an alliance. That happened a lot of times, right? If you want to form an alliance with another kingdom, you get married to a daughter of the king there, or the sister, or that kind of stuff, right? So eventually, right, 4 years after she gets to Caracol, Lady Batsek, who was the wife of Lord Water of Caracol, gives birth to her son, Lord Khan II. He eventually, when his father dies, he becomes king of Caracol in 618 AD. We know that he celebrates an important event, right? Some important ceremony at Caracol around 622 AD. We know this from the carved monuments at Caracol. And then in 626, Naranjo is defeated by Khan II, but not too badly. And Khan II decides to go back to Naranjo in 631 and then really defeats Naranjo. And then to celebrate that, to brag about it, he dedicates the hieroglyphic stair that I showed you before, right, in the slide, in 642 AD. Now, our panels that we found tells us that, like I said, more than, almost 40 years later, Naranjo gets revenge, attacks Caracol, and beats up Caracol, and then rips off the monuments and said, we're not going to leave this here for you to continue bragging. So our ruler in our tomb, like I said, had to be alive around here if they were the ones that helped Naranjo beat Caracol. Our panels also, right, tells us that this is when Lady Batsek dies. Right there. So just to fill it in. Well, how could we figure out if the person in our tomb was alive? Well, we got lucky. 2 pots that we found in the tomb had dates. See in here? That is a how, and there's a number. And it's 8 ahau. Now, ahau is the name of a day, and 8 is the number. It's like if we were to say, right, Monday, January the 1st. Monday, January the 1st doesn't happen every year. It changes over time. And so we can go back and look at the calendar and figure out when was it that the March, right? The 19th of March ended, let's say, on a specific day. And we figured out 692 AD. That's pretty close, right? To 680 AD. The second pot that we found in the tomb also had a date of 672 AD. So let's look at what we have again. So here are the dates for the 2 pots in the tomb. One 672, one 692. So the ruler could have died sometime around in here. And these are pots that he owned. That's why they buried them in the tomb with him. And guess what? It would suggest that the person was alive and could have participated in that war, right? So, and inside the tomb, we also found other pots that were gifts to the ruler from Naranjo, which again would suggest that indeed Xunantunich's ruler was a close ally of Naranjo and was gifted these things. And when that person died, they buried all the things that he owned with them in the tomb. Well, thankfully, today we can also date human or animal bone or anything that is organic. And so we decided to date the bones from the dead person in the tomb. And look what the date. Now, the date was not as specific as a calendar date that the Maya wrote on a pot or on a carved monument, right? Radiocarbon date gives you a range. And the range was 660 to 775. It means that that person was alive sometime in that range. Could be that they died at 775 AD. Let's put the other dates up. So there, right? I could have put this up on here. Right? So we know then that that person was alive, right? Sometime around this same time period here. Now, let's look at some other dates. We have a date from the deer bone that we found in the tomb. And it also, right, suggests that that person could have been alive during that time. Right? So there. We know that the monuments were taken from Caracol 680 AD. The deer bone shows that it was put in that tomb after 680 AD. So that ruler from Xunantunich died after Naranjo was defeated Caracol. And even the date on the bone, right, suggests that it goes from 660 to 775. So he or she was alive during that time. Well, another question we had was this person, because some of my colleagues said, is it possible that the person in your tomb at Xunantunich was from Naranjo. Because sometimes bigger cities will say, we are going to put in our ruler in your city so we can control you. Here again, we have some great scientific techniques that we can use today to determine whether somebody is from the Belize River Valley or if he is from somewhere else. We call that scientific method strontium isotope analysis. Let me explain how strontium isotope analysis works. You know that phrase or saying that says, you are what you eat? It is true. Here's why you are what you eat. We all eat plants. Beans, corn, those are from plants. Well, when you plant corn or beans, it absorbs minerals from the soils in which they're growing. And when you eat that plant, you absorb those minerals and they get put into your bones, right, as you grow. Now, in ancient time, people were not traveling very far from where they lived. And there were no Chinese supermarkets where you could buy things that were produced in China or in the United States or in Canada. No, back then, everything was produced locally. So if you know the minerals in the soils around the Belize River Valley and you find a skeleton, you should expect that if you analyze the skeleton, it should reflect the same kinds of minerals that we have in the Belize Valley. If you find that they don't have the same minerals, then that person is a foreigner. They're not a homeboy or a homegirl. Well, we did the strontium analysis on the human remains, right? And I've already mentioned that. And here, let me just quickly explain that, right? We've been doing this now for the last 5 to 10 years. And we now know, right, these are the values or the range. If a skeleton that we find was born, raised, and died in ancient times in Western Belize or the Belize River Valley, the Mopan River, the Macal, and then parts of the Belize, their strontium should range somewhere between 0.708 and 0.709. Look at the range of the person in the tomb, 0.708386, smack in the middle. Where do you think that person's from? No question. He's local or she's local, right? They were not from Naranjo because the strontium range for Naranjo or for, let's say, northern Belize or even for Caracol, they differ from the Belize Valley. The mineral composition at the trace element is different from one region to the next. So our ruler was local. We also decided we should do DNA analysis to see, right, to learn more about this person. DNA analysis can do a lot of things. It can tell you if the person was related to other skeletons that we have found at Xunantunich or at Cajalpech. Maybe they had alliances. They exchanged wives and stuff like that, right? Or women in alliances. But it can also tell you whether it's a male or a female individual. And this is where it got really interesting. When we did the DNA analysis, we thought it's a dude, it's a man inside the tomb. Guess what? It was a she. It wasn't a he. Now, a lot of people would think, oh, well, then they could not have been a ruler and they could not have participated in the war. There are, again, a lot of inscriptions carved on monuments that talk about women who were rulers. In fact, Naranjo had a woman whose name was Lady Six Sky, who was one of the most accomplished women rulers. And she took over because her son, who was really the king, was only about 5 years old when his father died. And so he was king, but at 5 years old, he couldn't make, important decisions. So his mother, Lady Six Sky, ruled Naranjo until he came of age. And there are other examples. So it shows that at Xunantunich, we also had a woman ruler who likely engaged in alliances and in wars with other important cities around this time. I mean, if we didn't have all these scientific techniques, all I could have said, 20, 30 years ago was, well, I found 2 stone monuments that had carvings on it. And then we found a tomb, and in the tomb was a skeleton, probably a man, and it had some artifacts in there. Thank you, goodbye. But isn't it amazing how, because of the science that we have today, because we can translate Maya writing now, because we can use DNA, because we can do strontium analysis, right? That we can tease out so much more information about the things that we discover and can really sort of rewrite or not rewrite, but fill in some of the lost history, right, of our ancient cities in Belize. I mean, it's amazing, right? To be able to give life, right, to all these ancient things and dead people, right? It's just, like I said, it's just incredible. What we do know is that eventually, right, when all this was happening, Naranjo was in control or controlled of Xunantunich. Just like before we got independence, Great Britain was in control of Belize. And once we got independence, Belize then started to make its own decisions. We now had our own leaders or rulers. Well, we know that eventually Naranjo gets defeated again. And in fact, especially by Tikal, sometime around 744 AD. And when that happens, Xunantunich now becomes an independent state. And we know that because we have carved monuments at Xunantunich that show their ruler. And on this monument we call Stela 8, it actually mentions Naranjo, but as an equal, not as the power governing Xunantunich, right? We also have other stelae at Xunantunich that talk about Xunantunich's rulers as independent rulers, not under the control. So again, 10 years ago, we didn't know a lot of this that, for Xunantunich. Today we do. Any questions so far? Or we can wait till, if you want to ask questions later on.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask some.
Yes, please go ahead.
So while we're speaking about this and mentioning that the ruler was a female, I have a curiosity going in my mind. So
Yes.
Xunantunich is like Maiden of the Rock or either Stone Lady, right? And then people believe
That's a modern name. That's a modern name, really. There's a legend where that came from, but the real name, we found a monument that actually has the real name of Xunantunich.
Oh wow. But then relating back to that, being the ruler a female, like it kind of like relates or is a coincidence that it was called Stone Lady or Maiden of the Rock Maiden of the Rock, or for the fact that the legend exists that there was this woman that everyone saw that always descended at El Castillo or something like that.
Well, it's a good point that you make. There's some some of my friends said that. They said, isn't that ironic, right? That the modern name that was given to the site by an archaeologist, Alexander Hamilton Anderson, isn't it funny that, the name is Lady of the Rock, and then you find this, the skeleton of this royal woman, right, in her tomb, who was a very, important woman for the site of Xunantunich. And I said, yes, it is, but in the end, I think it's more coincidence than fact. But quién sabe, right? Quién sabe. That's the beauty
Yeah.
about doing archaeology. There are always new clues that we keep finding. But the original name of Xunantunich was Katwitz, and we found that carved on another monument, panel 2 from Xunantunich. And Katwitz is Clay Mountain. And it's not surprising that it has that name because there is some really good quality clay all around Xunantunich. And in fact, Mr. David Magana, before he passed away, he would always go up by Xunantunich to get clay to make a lot of the pottery he used to make in San Jose Socots. But yeah, it's a good point. I'm glad you brought up that point, right? Because it does, it sort of suggests that kind of connection.
Jaime, is there any indications as to who this lady, the identity of this lady? I mean, a name or a...
No, unfortunately, I want to continue working at Xunantunich because I think our panel 2, and I didn't include a picture of our panel 2, but I think our panel 2 is part of a hieroglyphic stair. And I have a suspicion that the hieroglyphic stair at Xunantunich might be on the south side of the Castillo, because there's some palaces back there. And if it's there, hopefully it might, make a reference to this woman. So we haven't given hope. Yeah, because important women, like I said, were also mentioned in many of the historic texts found on these carved monuments. Yeah.
Sir, I got a question.
Yes.
Would it be like, can it be said that Benke site is related to Xunantunich? Like,
Without doubt.
Okay.
Without doubt. In fact, the Benke site, the same way how, for a short while, Xunantunich was under the influence, if not control, of Naranjo. In the same way, other small sites around Xunantunich were under the control of Xunantunich. Yes, without doubt.
I have a question, but it's not related to that.
That's all right.
What was the Snake Dynasty about? I'm curious about how it got its name.
Okay. Let me go back a bit. Sorry if this bugs your eyes. I'm trying to get to the. All right. Can you see this hieroglyph there? Might be
Yes.
better. Okay, let me just see if it's better right there again. See, there are 2 little fangs right there, like serpent fangs, right? It's like a snake head. Now, let me see there again. You can see it right there. See the 2 little fangs right there. Now, there again, you can see it's the head of a snake and the 2 fangs right there of the snake. So, sorry about that. There are other places where we can see it better, but every big important city back then had like a coat of arms. The Belize coat of arms is sub umbra floreo. And you notice on any official paperwork, we have our coat of arms. The United Kingdom also has a coat of arms, and they have a lion and a unicorn. And around it, it says, right, I think Elizabeth Regina, right? Elizabeth rules, or Elizabeth II reigns. The US has it, the Mexico has its emblem glyph, etc. So the Snake Dynasty got it because of that hieroglyph, right? Whenever they're talking about Calakmul, that emblem glyph, we call it, right? Or coat of arms always shows up. So it's like if our prime minister writes a letter to whoever, it's going to be on a letterhead with the Belize coat of arms.
So was like a snake sacred to them, or?
Oh, yes, right. I mean, what's interesting is cultures all over the world, usually, if you notice, the most important animals that are often considered sacred are powerful animals like lions, right, or jaguars or tigers, and also animals that are fearsome or can cause death. And so, right, serpents is another good example. Yeah. Crocodiles.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So again, we can ask some more questions later, but let me share some other, right, discoveries that we have made at Xunantunich. For instance, here, you know, everyone, as soon as you walk up into Xunantunich, on your right-hand side, everybody usually turns left and go to the Castillo. But on the left-hand side, there's a long palace. In fact, there's 4 buildings that make up what we call the North Palace Complex. And in 2017, we started to excavate these rooms. The roofs have collapsed and buried the inside of the rooms. And when we finish excavating them, you can see the doors, but the front walls of the rooms and the roof, fell in, and we don't rebuild those. Well, when we cleared these, we call them benches, and the walls inside the rooms, there's what it looks like again. We found a lot of graffiti carved on the walls of the rooms and sometimes on the floors. Right here, you can barely see. See, we have a light that we flash sideways. And see this section here? It's the headdress, like a jaguar headdress. And right there is that face. And see the one arm with the spear? Right there. There's the other arm right there. Right there.
Excuse me, sir. Can you provide or can you have a pointer, because I think we cannot see your mouse.
Oh, you can't see my mouse?
No, sir.
Sorry. For some reason, I thought you could see my mouse. Okay. Can you see where it says the little wooden thing that says north? It has an N. To the left of it, right? To the left of it, you can see the little person that I have in the drawing. And oh man, I wish, 20? I was just trying to see. So you can't see if I do this either. Hang on, I have an idea. I'll see if this will work.
I can see it. I can
Okay.
zoom it and see it.
Can you see my cursor now? No?
No, sir.
Can you see my sorry. All right. Can you see my pen? Oh gosh, this is hard holding
Yes,
it.
sir.
But anyway, it's right there. Sorry about that. For some reason, why did I think you could see my cursor? But anyway, it's, you know, like I said, it's just right by the little north arrow to the left of it. You can barely see some carvings. I don't know if you guys can zoom in, you might see it better.
Yes, I can zoom it and I can see it perfectly.
All right. So zoom in with your, you know, on your screen, and you might be able to make it out. So yeah, we started to find, you know, these little carvings. And in fact, here you can see a drawing of the room, right? The doorway, you see where it says room 7? That's the doorway going into the room. And then look at all the numbers are where we found some of these sketches. Like G1 is what we call a patoli board. It was like a game, like Ludo. You guys know what Ludo is, right? The game Ludo. Or you guys don't only play electronic games. Mr. Riz, you know, unlike us that used to have to play games with dice and boards, you know, these guys just play electronic games now. But I'm
Like
sure Mr. Riz remembers Ludo. Anyway, let me show you some, you know, here it is, right? Here's some of the carvings on the walls that we found, you know, that, like I said, the one on the right looks like Ludo. The one on the left looks like another warrior. This one on the left was really interesting. It shows a ruler sitting down cross-legged with his arms crossed, right? And they're looking at something that's like a mirror or some, you know, they're looking at something, right? And then the one on the right has a date. And the date, the dot is 1 and the bar is 5. So if you have 2 bars and a dot, it's 1, 5, and 5, 10, 11. 11 ahau. And we know that that date falls somewhere around 790 AD. So, you know, again, really cool stuff. Here's a close-up of that ahau glyph. Another piece of research that we just did recently was we excavated this ball court. You know, when you get to Xunantunich, if you go left to the Castillo, or you can go towards the little pyramid I showed you where we found the panels, this is what one of the ball courts used to look like. So in 2018, I decided to excavate it. Here we are excavating. And right where you walk down the middle, we put in several of those excavation units. And there's, you know, an example of the deepest excavation. Here's a better one, right? And again, people had worked on these buildings before I went there. But I don't like leaving anything to chance. And I know that at other sites in Belize, whenever I excavate down the middle of the ball court, we often find offerings. And guess what? We found a bunch of offerings. In the middle one, right, you can see there's a long excavation on the left and a smaller one, and then the one in the middle, and then some more. There was the remain of a child that had been sacrificed and then placed there, and then some pots put over it. And then at the south end, we found, if you look at the top left, as we excavated, we found like a little hole or a pottery. When we cleaned it, the picture on the right shows the big pot. Well, it was on top of another pot. And then we lifted it, and inside we found stingray spines and a bunch of those eccentrics. When we took a photograph of those things, check that out. Those were inside and around the pots. Some out of obsidian, some out of flint, different shapes. You notice the obsidian one that looks like a scorpion? Right? If you look at the top left, second row, Third one from the left. Beautiful little example of one of those obsidian eccentrics that look like a scorpion. Others are, there are various kinds of eccentrics there. Well, it wasn't the only one. In another excavation in the ball court, we found another offering. Look at this one. More scorpions, one that looks like a little head of a person, one that looks like a bird, one that looks like some animal, like the top left. I don't know, some kind of animal. To the right of that is the one that looks like a bird. To the right of that one looks like a little head of a person. And then to the right of that is a scorpion. Right? Well, it wasn't the only one. We found another one. And you can see here. And yet another one. We found five offerings. Look at all the shapes. I mean, it was just really, really cool because, I thought for sure people had excavated there. And this slide shows you what it's, the top one on the left shows you what it looked like when we started. And the bottom ones show you what they look like when we finished. When we started, when we finished, how we were able to excavate and conserve it. Right? And so today, when you go there, you can see that. And all those eccentrics, my plan is to put them in the visitor center at Xunantunich. But because of COVID, I haven't been back home for almost 2 years because of COVID. It's the longest I've ever been away from home. But, because last summer we couldn't work because we couldn't, I didn't go to Belize because of the COVID problem. So hopefully, knock on wood, I'll be able to go back to Xunantunich, summer 21, and continue the work that I've been doing there. So, here are some stuff. And then we've also done a little bit of work in a little group we call Courtyard, Group B. So much more left to be done at Xunantunich. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
How did they go about choosing their sacrifices of children? Did they look for a specific trait or something?
Yeah, if your last name is Tut, then you would probably be selected to be sacrificed. I'm kidding. Usually we know that they would, you notice all your classmates are laughing, right? I think we could sacrifice Christy or Marcella as well. But anyway, I'm not Giancarlo because I think he's probably related to me. But anyway, what they would often do is they would attack, neighboring cities and then take captives. And then they would take them and sacrifice them at their city. But sometimes, some people would have also, if the parents of a child died, they would sacrifice the child too. So, yeah, that gives you a sense of what they would do.
Jaime, was the human sacrifices, was it a very common practice among the Mayas?
Very, very common. And, a lot of times we think, oh my God, how awful that it was. We forget that in Christianity, in the Bible, what does God ask Abraham to do? Right? To sacrifice his only male child. What happened to Christ?
He got sacrificed.
Yeah, cultures all over the world practice human sacrifice. The Aztecs did it, the Inca in South America did it, tribes in other places in Europe and Asia, all over the world.
Were they all sacrificed the same?
No, sometimes, they would decapitate them. Sometimes they would pluck the heart out, strangulation. There are different forms.
From the child that they found, they were they able to tell how they sacrificed him?
Yes, this child appeared to may have been strangulated. Sometimes they cut out their heart too.
Okay.
We call it heart extraction.
Mr. Jaime, I wanted to know if like the animals in the offerings, was there like a reason why they chose those animals, or was it just so that the stones could look beautiful?
Sorry, could you, I missed the first part of your question.
I wanted to know what like the shapes of the stones that they had as the offerings. Did it have any reason behind it, or was it just so that the stones could look beautiful?
No, it's a question that we're trying to figure out. One of the things, one of my students is looking at the different types of animals that are being represented. You notice there are a lot of scorpions, and scorpions are somehow related to the underworld because they usually live, right, under rocks or underground or in dark places. So it looks like there's an underworld theme. Some of them are carved in the form of centipede. In Maya, I think some of the centipedes are called chapat. And so a lot of, like I said, creatures that are subterranean. But once in a while, we find a bird. So
Sir, I have a question that corresponds when you said that there was a woman ruler, and I wondered about this ruler if she could turn herself into a creature. Like some Mayas believe that they could turn into a creature, like men could turn into jaguars, and what will this woman ruler be turned to?
well, we know that many of the Maya rulers, right, believed that they had animal spirit companion, or they associate themselves with certain animals. It's in Maya, in Yucatec Maya, it is called the way. And so some rulers' way or animal counterpart, as you pointed out, were jaguars. Some were serpents, some were deer, rabbits, different types of animals. Because, as I said, I would hope that one of these days we could find the, more inscriptions that identified this woman. We could hopefully find some information about that, but we don't know.
Also, to the new findings, if you have permits of monuments to the U.S., or would that be illegal to take some new discoveries out of Belize?
Yes. The only way we allow anything to leave Belize is, for instance, sometimes we find an artifact that's in a lot of small pieces, and it needs what we call conservation and curation. We will sometimes, send it abroad for specialists, in conservation to put them back together and then send it back to Belize, but it belongs to Belize. If it's a complete object and all that, the only way it leaves Belize is if it goes on loan to a museum for a short exhibition, but then it goes back to Belize. It's just like, the Egyptians do the same. For instance, there are exhibitions that have King Tut's tomb in some of the museums in Europe, in America, in Canada, etc. So, but everything that is found is the property of the people of Belize.
Mr. Awe, do you think there is more to discover in Xunantunich?
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, oh yes, a lot more. And I want to be there to discover it.
Jaime, I just want to going back to the room with graffiti. What relationship is there? I mean, to the purpose of this art, was it some kind of school, or I know in Xunantunich, Mr. Khan has mentioned there is a room where probably children were taught how to write or something like that.
So, Mr. Ruiz, one of my friends and colleagues that also does some work at Xunantunich indeed found a room with a lot of graffiti up by the, towards the top of the Castillo. And they suggested that, they're the ones that suggested that maybe it was a room where, people were taught how to do these things, right? And I'm not too sure of that interpretation, because if you use the walls of a room as a classroom, you would quickly run out of space, right? It would be easier to make, pallets out of limestone plaster and then carve on that, and then, get another one and do some more. That way you won't run out of space, because you can make those, pallets as many as you need. I think that, right, much of the graffiti that we find in some of the rooms, how sometimes you're sitting down and we doodle, right, so to speak, or, you might carve things or scribble down things. I often try to do it on pieces of paper when I'm just sitting there in the room. Or so I think that much of this graffito is related to those kinds of activities. And usually when we scribble down or we draw little things, sometimes we do it in the mud or in the sand, we do it about things we know, right? So we might, try to draw figures of people or of events, that kind of stuff. So those are the two hypotheses that are still, out there.
Are there any other questions, final questions? Perhaps, Dr. Awe, can you briefly acquaint us with the different projects that are ongoing on the Belize River Valley, or
Certainly.
anywhere else in Belize, by different archaeologists?
There is a lot of archaeological research that's done in Belize. In fact, we average about 20 projects every year. And, most of them are in Western Belize. Some of them are up in Orange Rock. I think there's maybe one or two in Corozal. There are two in Toledo. There's one in Stan Creek, one in San Pedro, on Burgess Key. But in Western Belize, there's the project at Caracol by the Chases, who are now at the university in California. There's my project, and we work at Xunantunich, Cajalpech, Baking Pot. And then there's a project by an archaeologist named Lisa LeCount at Xunantunich. Xunantunich is right across the river from Clarissa Falls, where Chena Galvez has her place. Then there's another project at El Pilar with Annabelle Ford. There's a project down the Belize River by another archaeologist from the University of New Hampshire. One by Caves Branch. And let's see, I don't know, no, they're not going on anymore. There was another project under the direction of Cynthia Robbins that was working at a site called Chan not too far from Sokots, but they're now working up in Corozal at Aventura is the name of the site. And then there used to be another project up by Mart's farm, up by Vaca Plateau, but they aren't it's not ongoing anymore. I think they stopped about a year or two ago. And then of course, Jason Yeager's project at Buena Vista, and then his wife, Kat Brown, she also does a project at Xunantunich at the same time that I do my project at Xunantunich. So, lots of projects.
And
if any, so I was going to say, any students want to participate, please let us know.
Yeah, that was my next question. Yes. I guess it's open to any student who wants to be a part, no?
Yes, a lot of students have worked with me at Cajalpech, Xunantunich, all over the place.
And also there is the Arenal site, no? The Arenal Maya site on the road.
And Kat Brown is the one that's working there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question is, you made mention of another possible excavation at the Benke site. What is it about?
So when, David, when we worked there, gosh, when was that again? 2015, I think, 2015, 2016. I had applied for a grant to do the work there. And the grant that I got was primarily, the site was being destroyed, as you well know, and people were dumping garbage and all that. And I remember once I went by there and it was like, hey, this can't continue. And then some of the good folk from Benque Viejo were really starting to get concerned about it. And so they came to me and said, is there something we can do? So I applied for a grant. We got the grant to preserve, the site. And so much of the work we did was essentially just to clean it and then conserve the buildings. But I did not do much in terms of excavating into the buildings. So we don't, we can tell what the buildings were used for, but in terms of when they were made and, if there are any, we found one offering with eccentric flints again. So I want to go back and now do the excavations, like, the deep excavations into the buildings so that we can then have more information, maybe find burials if there are any there that we can tell about the people that live there.
You said that you found out the purpose of that site. What was it?
It was a small town under the control of Xunantunich. And we know this because, as I said, the one offering that we found had those flints in the shapes of scorpions and other animals, very much like Xunantunich. So it's the same tradition. The pottery that we found, mostly on the surface, looks the same like pottery that we have found at Xunantunich. So certainly reflecting, right, that kind of close relationship. Some of the buildings there most of the buildings at the Benque site are residences where people live. But there are a couple of them that are shrines, right? That they are like small temples. And it is very likely that they contain burials. So maybe we can go look for them.
All right. Can everybody put on their videos so that we can thank Dr. Awe? I mean, we are close to the final.
I just noticed that Sonia is also zooming in there.
Right. We
Sonia, saludos.
Yeah, we have people from Cache as well.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. I mean, we listened to this presentation like 2 years ago, and I mean, it's so fascinating, and it's.
And I've added some more stuff, as you've noticed.
Yeah.
We found some more information.
And I mean, knowing the story and then visiting Xunantunich is just awesome. No, it's kind of reliving the history when you're there at Xunantunich and having known the story.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Jaime. I know you're a very busy person and you always keep finding time to connect with Belizeans. And I will call on one of your relatives, as you said well earlier, Gian Guerra Awe, who will deliver the say a few words of thanks, no? And when you come by, we invite you to come and visit our school, John Paul II, at our new campus. And we have a beautiful T-shirt for you waiting.
Awesome. And I hope you know that, I will never, ever be too busy to share this information with Belizeans, especially Belizean students, because in many ways, I feel that one of my main responsibilities is to try to encourage and help train the next generation of Belizean archaeologists. So anytime I am more than willing to share, right, the work that I do and the discoveries that we make with you. So don't hesitate to ask.
All right, thank you. Gian?
Well, Mr. Jaime Awe, my uncle Theo, on behalf of John Paul II Junior College and student body, and we would like to thank you for the great education you have, or the teaching that you have taught us today. And as how Mr. David said, that I'm sure that when we go to visit Xunantunich, we will like know the meaning, like the more meanings of Xunantunich. So yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. And I got my first shot of the vaccine. I should be getting my second one in February. I think the third week of this month, and I'm hoping to travel to Belize in March or May. And if I do, and you guys are still in session, I would be more than happy to actually take the class on a tour of Xunantunich and to talk more about the site.
Yes. So which vaccine did you get?
The Moderna.
Oh, Moderna. Okay. So hopefully it will come soon to Belize, no? Hopefully in March.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I've been away too long. I miss.
Yeah.
Subrata.
Yeah.
Howie, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
Hi, Subrata.
Hey, how are you? I just
happy birthday.
I just heard that you got your vaccine.
My first one.
Good. I got both of mine.
Excellent.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much again, everybody who joined in. Nice seeing you again, Jaime. And we hope that some of our students can volunteer and join in any archaeological undertaking in Belize to better appreciate our story, our identity as heirs to the valleys, to the Valley of Kings and Queens. So thank you very much. And we're having another a presentation by Dr. Annabelle Ford this Friday. So feel free to join in at 6 in the evening, Belize time. And Dr. Annabelle will lecture on the botanical archaeological project at El Pilar. So thank you very much and have a very good evening.
All right, well, great to see all of you.
All right.
Subrata, great to see you. Sonia.
It's done already?
Yeah.
I just saw the notice. Oh, okay. All right, well, next time.
Next
Good,
time.
Good seeing you, Jaime.
Yes. Stay healthy and keep safe.
Yeah. Are you in Arizona?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Giancarlo, saludos a tu mamá.
Gracias.